Good evening. We are live again. We'll be uploading this video. If you're watching this, we have uploaded it on YouTube or find it on Spotify, where you find all of our Vampire Fantasy Football Forum content. Give us a like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Hit that follow button. Get notified when we go live or when we upload new content. We are uploading new content weekly for every week of the NFL season. We have hot takes, and this week we did not do a waiver wire episode. Nope, we wanted to wait. We do not break news here at Vampire Nation. We do not break any NFL news, except we want to take a step back. We want to think through and give a clear reaction to what we see happening this week. We saw the trade deadline for the NFL come and go, and there were some moves that happened this week, and we need to think about that. And I will have some thoughts on waiver wire, because I mean we all have that time where we need to operate the waiver wire still. We have bye weeks that happen. We have or that are happening this week. There are 6 teams on bye, and there are injuries that happen. We need to understand how to navigate the waiver wire in our leagues. The difficult part about being a content creator, about being somebody who talks about fantasy football, I don't know your league. I can give you a general information, what I think, but I don't know your league. So if I tell you a guy to go pick up, I don't know where you at. Are you fighting for a playoff spot? Are you secure in your playoff spot that you can stash people? Because if you're fighting for a playoff spot, you shouldn't be stashing. You need players that will help you right now. We're going to get to that. First, let's discuss the trade deadline. It came and went, and there were some moves that happened, some things that occurred. Players found new teams. Other players didn't find new teams. So we're gonna talk about what happened, give our reaction to it. And I'm just going to go down the list. So this is in no particular order. This is in the order that I have in front of me here. So we're going to talk about this. Nyheim Hines goes to the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills send over Zach Moss. And this is not going to be every player. This is fantasy football players that are relevant. So defensive players, I'm not going to discuss, because the biggest one was Bradley Chubb from the Broncos to the Dolphins. And all that needs to tell you there is the Dolphins are all in on winning this year. They know they have to go through Buffalo and Kansas City in the AFC to even contend for an AFC championship and a spot at going to the Super Bowl. So that's the only defensive one I'm going to mention. Back to Nyheim Hines going to the Bills. This will impact Devin Singletary a bit, but Nyheim Hines is not the between the tackles runner that Devin Singletary is. He is going to replace him, Singletary, as a pass catcher. That is Hines' specialty. The third down guy, the change of pace, the quick back. He's going to be the guy that's coming out of the backfield catching passes. I like this move for Hines. I think this is going to be a good move for Buffalo. I think we all were hoping that Buffalo would go out and get a guy like Kareem Hunt or someone along those lines, and that did not happen. But I think this is a positive move, and what that tells you is Singletary is still going to have value. There'll still be workload in that backfield for him. He didn't lose it. And that should then equal out to still positive for both Hines and Singletary. That downgrades James Cook in that backfield, that he is somebody that we have to wait and see now. It's not this year. On the Zach Moss side, going to Indianapolis, I think they just wanted a back to add to it. That probably downgrades Deion Jackson just a little bit. But to me, I think this bumps Deion Jackson up still. He is the guy you want to roster as the handcuff to Jonathan Taylor. And then that bumps Jonathan Taylor up a little bit, because Nyheim Hines was the guy that was getting the workload behind Taylor. But with Taylor being questionable still with an ankle injury, that's why I believe the Colts want Zach Moss, is they knew they needed depth behind Jackson within that backfield. Next, and I'm not going to discuss, the Jaguars did acquire Calvin Ridley, but he is suspended this year, so that's more of a dynasty play. If you're playing dynasty, if Calvin Ridley is out there on your waiver wire, I would go add him. You're seeing what Jacksonville is doing this year with Trevor Lawrence, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, and Travis Etienne, and Evan Ingram. Can't forget tight end streamer du jour, Evan Ingram. Go add Calvin Ridley in your dynasty leagues. Miami acquires Jeff Wilson Jr. This is also after they send Chase Edmonds to the Broncos. So, acquiring Jeff Wilson, if he had been dropped because the 49ers had already added CMC and Elijah Mitchell was also a handcuff in most leagues, Jeff Wilson had become a handcuff, and you saw his value drop because of CMC. Jeff Wilson becomes very interesting now. Raheem Mostert, yes, he is the lead back for Miami still, but Raheem Mostert is also one of the most probable to be injured this year as far as running backs. Jeff Wilson's going to step in. He is already very familiar with the system. It's the same type of system that Kyle Shanahan operates in San Francisco. So he becomes very usable right away, not just as a handcuff, but as a potential flex, maybe RB2. But if something happens to Mostert, he becomes that guy, that next man up. As far as Chase Edmonds goes, I think the Broncos are doing this to add depth. So I think this is a football move to add depth. And I think it's interesting. If you've held on to him, if he's not on your waiver wire, and you've held on to him, you're probably still holding on. Melvin Gordon's probably a fumble or two away of getting benched outright. And let's face it, Chase Edmonds is better than Latavius Murray, who started over Melvin Gordon. So this backfield becomes very crowded, but Chase Edmonds has the opportunity to go in and have an impact right away. I don't blame you if you say I want to see it first. I would too, but I think he has the opportunity to do well and actually beat out one of the already established starters. Chase Claypool goes from Pittsburgh over to Chicago. I think this is a move. I don't fully agree with this. I think Chicago is trying to add pieces when they're a year away from being a year away, but they are trying to sell you on the fact that we want to be relevant. We want good offense. We need more offensive pieces. And this is a way that they're trying to do it. So I think it's an interesting piece. If you buy that Pittsburgh knows what they're doing, which they do when it comes to wide receiver valuations, getting a Pittsburgh Steeler wide receiver is most of the time a good thing. Claypool will compete for targets with, I am blanking on the name of the starting wide receiver for Chicago, but that's all. Chicago already has a low pass rate, though. So Claypool becomes just an ad where I think this tells more on the Pittsburgh side where Pickens was taking over that role. So it's Johnson and Pickens on Pittsburgh side that you really are paying attention to. TJ Hawkinson goes from Detroit to Minnesota. Very interesting that Detroit is willing to send a tight end over to a division rival. Minnesota did this because Irv Smith is down and going to IR with an injury, and they needed a tight end. I think this ups the value just a little bit for TJ Hawkinson. If you had him, you weren't dropping him. You're already playing him, and he's in a better offense, potentially better offense, but better situation as a whole. He is competing for targets now with Justin Jefferson. But Adam Thielen is always seeming like he's potentially hurt and then comes back in. So there's opportunity here for Hawkinson to, increase what his value is. As far as leaving Detroit, That bolsters Amon-Ra St. Brown. That bolsters Khalif Raymond. That bolsters Josh Reynolds. If DJ Chark is able to come back, if Jamison Williams gets promoted off the injured reserve and out, he will, all of those guys, it bumps up. I'm not necessarily adding the backup tight end for Detroit, but it's something to pay attention to. Next, one of the more popular ones to talk about, and I think this is going to be the last one I talk about with trade grades here before I talk about who did not get traded. But Kadarius Toney goes from New York to Kansas City. And stop me if you've already heard this. Kadarius Toney signing with Kansas City. That means Toney is now the replacement for Tyreek Hill. This is how Kansas City is going to be replacing Tyreek Hill. If you've already heard that, stop listening to that type of analysis. That's wrong. That's reactionary. Analysis should not be reactionary. Yes, we are always reacting to what happened, but we should not be speculating to the point that we are on that. This is wrong. This is backwards. Be better. Be smarter. Do it better. This is not a replacement for Tyreek Hill. Kansas City has moved on from Tyreek Hill. We should too. Tyreek Hill is now in Miami, and we all have seen him. He waits for passes that are underthrown by 10 yards from Tua, and he wishes as he waits for him that Tua had the arm strength that Mahomes has. We know this. He won't say it, but we know it. This is not the Tyreek Hill replacement. What this Kansas City has moved on, and the reason I can tell that they've moved on is Mahomes is a better quarterback this year than he was last year. Mahomes has more, or Kansas City as a whole has more big play from passes, whether that's yards after the catch or air yards, than they did last year. Mahomes is not focusing on one wide receiver, but he gets the entire wide receiver room within a game. He is targeting all of them. The offense doesn't scheme for one, it schemes for all. That makes it better. Kadarius Toney is a piece that gets added to where if a team like the Chargers or the Bills are going to play cover two, Kadarius Toney is a guy that just adds an element to, you put the ball in his hands, you see what he can do. We know what he's capable of doing. We saw it last year before he got injured on his rookie deal. The Giants were out. Kansas City is in to see what they have. If anything, this is a McCole Hardman replacement because Hardman has not lived up to what he thought it was. And by the way, when Hardman was drafted, it was said, well, that's the Hill replacement. And Hardman disappointed. If you think Kadarius Toney is the Hill replacement, you will be disappointed. And what's going to be said is this was a bust. I don't believe it's a bust. I think we have to wait and see. If you're a team that doesn't need a win right now, and Kadarius Toney is still somehow out there on your waiver wire, and you can stash him, do it, just to see what's going to happen. All the Kansas City wide receivers are starting to find their groove. This week, Juju Smith-Schuster has talked about like none other. I think the real play is Marcus Valdes-Scantling. If he is out there on your waiver wire, you should go at him. He is going to have the game, not Juju. They both might. But I think MVS is the play here this week against Tennessee. Kadarius Toney will add an element to this offense that is very nice. It's a needed element where you can send MVS streaking down the field. You can put Juju as the deep crosser. You can send Kelsey on the seam. And you have Kadarius Toney also filling in underneath where you put the ball in his hands and he can make guys miss and he can do things after the catch. This is a team build. This is not a fantasy football build. That's what Kansas City is doing. So, avoid analysis that Toney to the Chiefs is the Hill replacement. That's bad analysis. Don't fall for that trap. Now, guys that did not get traded that we thought would, and we just have to be okay with it. Elijah Moore did not get traded from the Jets, nor did Denzel Mims. We don't know what that means. All we know is if you have him, you're probably dropping him. We don't know. We can speculate. But this wide receiver core for the Jets runs through Garrett Wilson and apparently Corey Davis. Brandon Cooks is injured, and I think it's his ego, but we don't know. We hoped Cooks got dealt, but he did not. So Cooks did not go, and the Texans play Thursday night, which it is Thursday as I'm recording this. And it doesn't look like he's going to play, so we don't know. Hunt did not get traded from the Browns. We all thought Hunt may go to LA, may go to the Rams, may go to the Bills. There was speculation he wants out, but that did not happen. You're holding Hunt. He still has the value that he had before. And I think that is all as far as like big wide receivers that we did, or big, I guess, fantasy players that we did not see traded. Those were two of the biggest ones. So when it comes to the waiver wire, I'm going to switch topics here now. When it comes to the waiver wire, part of why I did not just put out a waiver wire again, we are at the point we're midway through the fantasy football season. Your team is in one of three categories. Your team is in dead last or close to it, and every win matters from here on out. If you don't win, you take another loss, you're done. Your season's over, and it's almost over as is. Or, on the other spectrum, you are comfortably in first place. You have the right record. You're 7-0, 6-1, 5-2, whatever it is. You're cruising. You're in the lead. You got the guys. You're okay. Or you're somewhere in the middle, where if you're on the higher end of the middle, you're still fighting for wins because you can reach getting to the upper echelon of your league. Or you're on the lower end, but you're scrapping and your team is there. It can make that push. Depending on what your team situation is, and again, I am talking seasonal leagues. This is not Dynasty. You have to look at the waiver wire in Dynasty a whole lot different than you have to look at it in seasonal leagues. Dynasty has long-term value, so the waiver wire is not as active. You can find players on a Dynasty waiver wire that you may add. Now, you might not think about adding in a seasonal league, but it's there. So if you're playing a Dynasty, not all of this is applicable. If you're in a Vampire League, which, of course, we are branded after Vampire Leagues here, only one team has access to the waiver wire, and that's the Vampire. The rest of you, sucks to be you if you didn't draft well. And there are other types of leagues out there, but we are focusing on seasonal leagues with this type of information. If you're a dead last, if you're on the bottom of your league, you need wins now. If you hear people talking about, well, you need to stash this player, stash to see what happens, you don't have that luxury. You need production now. You need to be going after guys that will get you plays and get you usability this week. This is not a time to stash. You don't have that luxury. You need to be playing with other types of luxury.